In this lecture we're going to look at our snaps. This is our snapping palette. If your snapping palette's not open, go to Window in the menu bar, Palettes, and choose Snapping. Now I'm going to change the shape of my snapping palette. I'm just going to grab it by that corner and I'm going to pull it down so that we've got one row down the side and another row down that way. So it's aligned vertically if you like. Now you can place the snapping palette wherever you like. You can dock it to the top, you can dock it to the sides and so on. This snap is for snapping to the grid. If I double click on it, it'll open a dialog box where I can choose my grid options. Click OK, and there we are. So there's my snap grid, 1/8 of an inch. Now generally I like to use 4 inches or 100 millimeters for my snap grid, and a reference grid of about 36 inches, or if I'm using metric, it's a meter. Now for this scale drawing, it doesn't make sense because we're drawing at 1:1 scale, but when I'm working on a house or a landscape project, those dimensions certainly do make sense. Now I find that snap to grid can be troublesome, particularly where you're trying to draw in relation to other objects, like an existing house or existing landscape. So I like to turn that off until I absolutely need it. This one though, snap to objects, is fundamental. You must have this one turned on. Let's OK that. I've double clicked on it, and here are the options for snapping to an object. So you can snap to an end point, a midpoint, and when you're dimensioning you might find it easier to turn all those snaps off. OK. Snap to angle. Let's double click on that and see what it is. Now I'm going to turn this option off because I don't want to see that anymore, but I can disable all of my snaps, which I have to do sometimes, by using the back quote key, and I'll show you that in a minute. So here we are, we've got angle axes 45, 30, put in a semicolon, 15 degrees, and now I can have angles at 15 degrees. Now the angle is very useful. Let me show you why it's so useful. If I draw a line at an angle, you might notice I'm snapping to 15 degrees, 30 degrees, but also if I'm at a different angle and I want to be perpendicular to that, I just have to move my mouse until the word perpendicular comes up, and that perpendicular is a function of that angle snaps. So the angle snaps are a great one to leave on all the time. This is snap to intersection. It'll find the intersection of two objects. If I draw a line through there, it'll make it easier for me to see them. It'll say object, 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 object. So that is where it's snapping to the intersection. And this is my smart points. So useful. Now this one here, which is the snap to distance, can be useful, but leave it switched off most of the time. And the smart edge, we're going to come back to that when we do 3D modeling, so you can wait till we get to that. But leave those 3 turned off until you absolutely need them. So what about this one, the smart points? I've double clicked on it, brings up my options for the smart points, and we've got this thing called a data, which we will be using. And now this part here, acquire smart point if the mouse stops for half a second. Now it's great when you're starting at half a second, but as you get better at Vectorworks you might change that to 0.3 or 0.2 of a second. I'm going to leave it at 0.5. What are the smart points all about? Well, I think I need to draw something to explain it. I'm going to use the rectangle tool again. I touch a point and you'll notice that I acquire a little red square. That's my smart point, and I can now line up with that point anywhere on my screen. I can touch another point, just leave my cursor there for half a second, and I've now acquired another smart point. Click, and then click again. So the smart points allow you to acquire something to line up with. Really useful. If you want to be in the center of something, you just touch that point, and now I can line up with the center of that. Touch the center of that point, and I can line up the center of that as well. I'm just going to undo some of these. Let's draw a line from there to there. Now I want to mirror that line and have it arrive on this rectangle exactly. So I'm going to use my mirror tool for that. But in order to use the mirror tool, I need a line down the middle. If I touch that smart point there, or I acquire that smart point I should say, and I acquire that smart point there, I can find a little box in the middle of those two. That's that point there, click, and you can see there it is there my line is exactly in the right place, click, and so that smart point, that ability to find that grey line between 2 points, really useful. Let me just show you that again. You acquire that smart point, then you acquire this smart point, and halfway between you'll get a little line. And you can do that again, and you can do that again, and so on, infinitely. But it's just a useful technique to acquire that line between smart points. That's what this one's all about. Snap to line between smart points. That's that line that I've just shown you. Now the datum is really useful as well. Let's have a look at the datum. It says the datum if the mouse stops for 2 seconds, or you can use the G key to manually set it. Now I suggest you don't turn that on, you just use the G key. You go to a point here, you hit the G key, and now your floating data bar is measuring from that datum point, allowing you to move anywhere you like, and your floating data bar is showing you where you are in relation to that datum point. So you could hit the tab key, type 1 inch there. You're now 1 inch away from that datum point. The other trick I use with that is to go to a point like this, hit the G key, then go across here, and then have a look to see how far away it is. You might notice that in the X direction, it's 5.5 inches away. I don't need that anymore, so I can get rid of that. So the snaps are really fundamental to using Vectorworks. I use these for all the time, but if I do need to disable them, I'll hold down the back quote key. That's the key at the top left of your keyboard. It's just underneath the escape key. Just watch what happens to these icons. And you'll notice that I can't snap to any corners of anything. Put your finger down again. So that's very useful sometimes.